of strong bond and bonhomie that India and Russia share, and how we are going to strengthen it from here on. The trade between India and Russia has increased many folds in the past 4 to 5 years. There's a focus on the defense sector that Russia would also want India to increase the deal upon, and India also looking at better negotiations and the carcade of the Indian officials. The MEA was here, S. Jaishankar, other officials from the Russian embassy, the Russian defense attaché, all of them are leaving the Palam airport, and they would be, heading towards ITC Moria as the place where President Putin is leaving, will be staying here. And PM Modi is all set to host a very private dinner for President Putin at 7 LKM. So the visuals from the Palam airport, whatever we expected and told our viewers, were actually at play at Palam airport.
You are correct, Amit. You are correct.
Aircraft,
all right, let's cut across to Pranay for a brief while. My colleague who's joining us from Lok Kalyan Marg. Pranay, it does seem that the motorcade of the Prime Minister, and it's a repeat deja vu moment like the SCO summit, where you have the Prime Minister ride alongside President Putin to Lok Kalyan Marg. Can you give us what the next 30 hours for President Putin will look like, and what will be on the table for discussion? Of course, we're talking about trade, we're talking about defense, we're talking about labor pact, so a lot there, but give us a sense of what to expect.
First of all, the full spread of food will be on spread for President Vladimir Putin, because Prime Minister.
So you talk about food and we'll bring everybody in. On a lighter note, Pranay, on a lighter note, will President Putin actually partake? Because like I said, with this whole palace intrigue and mystery and that aura around him, does he actually, will he eat the food that has been laid out, for the president, or will it be what he's brought with him? So, what is the official communique on that front?
Certainly, because we really don't know, Preeti, what will be what will be his dinner, how he will be taking his dinner here at 7 LKM. But see the venue, see the setting. If Prime Minister Narendra Modi has gone there at Palam technical area to receive him, if he's traveling along with President Vladimir Putin, if they are in the same motorcade, and if they are coming to the same place, they will be having dinner together. So definitely, this is the kind of message of a mutual bond. This is a mutual respect, and this is about the mutual confidence on each other. And that is why President Vladimir Putin, who's known and whose security establishment is known for checking everything, and they do not take any risk because the threat to his life is way high, but still they trust friend, and India is a friend. And there is a special arrangement, if I can ask my camera person to zoom a bit so that you can take a glimpse of certain lighting. There is a special lighting in Prime Minister's residence, 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, and this is specially lit for welcoming President Vladimir Putin here at Lok Kalyan Marg. And if as far as the next 30 hours are concerned, President Vladimir Putin will be hosted here for the private dinner, but thereafter, his main day would be tomorrow. He will be ceremonially received at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Tri-Service Guard of Honor will be given to President Vladimir Putin. Thereafter, as part of the state visit, he will go to Rajghat, and thereafter, the bilateral talks will take place in Hyderabad House. Both the leaders their meeting has already started, but they will have different phases: in-car meeting, on-dinner meeting. Thereafter, they will be having a restricted talk between both the leaders at Hyderabad House. Thereafter, there will be a delegation level talks, and then both the leaders will come before the media cameras. They will be giving out media statement. They will be announcing what is their vision to take forward India and Russia partnership for next decade. What are the areas where India and Russia want to expand their partnership? This visit is very important, Preeti, because 7 cabinet ministers of the Russian cabinet are traveling with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Besides that, India-Russia Business Forum will be addressed by both these leaders, and that is a very important, a very significant meeting, because India and Russia are trying to expand their bilateral trade, and the target, which is of $100 billion by 2030. So like within 5 years, we have to achieve that target. How that can be done, that is the main area of focus for India and Russia and both the leaders to take care of.
Right. So fair amount of one-on-one time, like Pranay pointed out, the Prime Minister will spend with President Putin. But Rajdeep, Sandeep and Gaurav, to bring you in, Rajdeep, the point that you were, finishing earlier, it is, as historic it might be, it's multifaceted, multi-layer in the current geopolitical context. Just about a week ago, we had European envoys who did, in fact, write a critical piece on India inviting President Putin. They were, of course, the MEA did say that was unacceptable. And now there seems to be a change of, at least tune where the European envoys and European nations are concerned that maybe because India is close to President Putin, that we try and build that kind of pressure on Russia to possibly, move towards peace.
It's very interesting. Something happened which I haven't seen in many years. Probably it never happened unprecedentedly. 3 ambassadors, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, wrote an editorial piece on Monday where they claim to have targeted Putin. They say we had nothing. It wasn't about India. It was about Russia. One day later, the Russian ambassador hit back and spoke about European betrayals. Now, I haven't seen when you have a diplomatic war being fought in the Indian media in this manner. So clearly, look, let's be honest. Mr. Putin is a divisive figure. Gaurav says he's not a pariah. The fact, though, is that several countries continue now to have embargoes, and the United States itself, it's the hypocrisy of the United States. Why have they, if he's not a pariah, imposed 25% penalties on us for doing our dealings with Russia? But large parts of the world continue to do it without the same impact. Certainly, China hasn't had the same impact. So there are a lot of double standards and hypocrisies there. But the truth of the matter is, Vladimir Putin is seen, after Ukraine, as someone who splits the world. You can see him as a strong nationalist defending his country's interests, or you can see him as little more than, even the ICC seems to suggest, someone who's been accused of serious war crimes and someone who's invaded the territorial integrity and sovereignty of another country. So it just depends who you talk to. And India, I think, has in its own way managed to achieve some kind of a balance between the two sides. At a time when the world is polarized, India plays the kind of balancing role. So you'll probably see President Putin and Prime Minister Modi here today. Who knows, 3 months down the line, if there's a successful trade deal, you'll see Donald Trump coming and being coming to India. So India is the place to be.
So European Union anyway will be coming to India once again, and Europeans are very keen
for 26 January,
on that.
As our guest on Republic Day.
Absolutely, on Republic Day. Now, this is what shows you India's power, India's growing stature in the world, and India not letting the West talk down to India, Rajdeep. That's the change that's coming now in India. We're not letting the West decide what's important for us or what we should do. Initially, they did try. India should criticize Russia. Why should we criticize Russia? It's for, Russia to decide what's in Russia's national interest, and it's for India to decide what's in India's national interest. So that's exactly what is happening. And now the West is coming around to what India can actually do, play a big role in ensuring that there is peace. India is the only country, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Rajdeep, I reported both, Rajdeep and Preeti, I reported when Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in Moscow, and then when Prime Minister Narendra Modi went to Kiev, and then when he went to Kazan once again. Only country that can talk to all sides and hope that there is a solution, and hopefully there will be forward movement towards peace. Now, what Russia is now saying, what America is doing is wrong. It's blatant American double standards that they are taking, Russian fuel, they're taking fertilizers, but they're imposing penalties on India. So it's American double standards. Why should we be penalized for it? Or why should we say, just because Europe is not talking to Putin, it doesn't mean he's a pariah. It's their fight. We are not involved in that fight.
Sandeep, would you want to come in? Because this is, whichever way one looks at it, it's a tightrope walk where India is concerned because of the optics of it, and there will be ramifications and consequences of the optics and what happens tomorrow. With what Rajdeep also touched on, with what we've been speaking on, we will have the trade delegation from America coming in the next 2 weeks. Hopefully, we are looking at, the tariffs coming down from a 50% to a 15%, but all of that could very well be contingent on what our, deal with Russia is, where oil is concerned, where trade is concerned, importantly, where defense is concerned.
Absolutely, Preeti. And India is the only major country in the world that has logistics support agreements with both the Russian Federation and with the United States. We signed the logistics support agreement with the United States in 2016, and just a few hours back, in fact, the Russian Duma has approved the logistics support agreement with India. And this actually is, in a microcosm, what India's policy is all about. We tread the middle line. We pursue our national interests. For us, a relationship with the Russian Federation is as important as the relationship with the United States. And we are prepared to see both of these relationships independent of each other. And we would not want to be dragged into what the Europeans think, or what they feel, or they want us to do their bidding. That's not going to happen. India has always pursued a middle path, and it will continue to do so. And we are going to see evidence of that in the next couple of weeks. We will pursue this line with the Russian Federation, with President Putin, because Russia brings a lot of things to the table when it comes to whether it's energy security, whether it is military, cutting-edge military technology. Russia
the only
gives
country,
us...
Sandeep, that actually shares cutting-edge military technology with us, because everybody else is giving us old weaponry.
No,
Absolutely.
France.
Preeti, the BrahMos missile would not have come into India's inventory but for President Putin. And I've heard this from the people who have made the BrahMos missile program happen. Dr. Shivtanu Pillai has told me that but for President Putin's personal intervention, we would not have got the BrahMos missile. It's an extremely political missile.
S-400 as well, Sandeep.
But for Operation Sindoor, we would, but for that BrahMos missile, the Operation Sindoor would not have been the success that the BrahMos missile, that the BrahMos missile had performed the way it did. And the S-400 missile, Preeti, that's another example of a political missile that was steered by this government. Prime Minister Modi pushed for that despite US sanctions. So these are the two war-winning tools that were given to us by Russia, and that's the reason that we value Russia's partnership so enormously. Nuclear-powered attack submarines, they've helped us with our ballistic missile submarine program. These are kind of, collaborations with no country in the world will give us. The Americans will not even let us come anywhere near any of their nuclear submarines. What to talk of leasing one or even getting technology to build one. So that's why the Russian-Indian relationship, this partnership, this extraordinary strategic partnership is so important. It's so valuable for us, because it protects certain core interests that both countries have laid way back in the time of the former Soviet Union, and that continues in the time of the Russian Federation.
You're right there, and it's a relationship, Sandeep, that has weathered many decades. And the reason why it's weathered and evolved is it's constantly changed, and especially in the current context of multipolarity and the geopolitics of it all. It is, a trapeze act. It's a tightrope walk. It's not easy in terms of diplomacy, and let's hope we find and we continue, which we are on a path of finding, treading the same path. All right, I believe, we're getting an information that the motorcade is now pulling into Lok Kalyan Marg. My colleague Pranay is joining us from there. Pranay, the last time around you were giving us a sense of what is possibly on the menu. Before we come to you, and I'll cut across, Pranay, just give us a moment coming to you. The minute the cavalcade comes in, the motorcade pulls in, just give us a heads up. But taking one quick comment from everyone, Rajdeep, Gaurav, Sandeep, Rajdeep, to pull you in. For a moment, let's just step back. Yes, it's a historic visit, very important. We've got the best coverage, but we also have the biggest coup, if I can say journalistically. We've got the president of Russia speaking to us for 90 minutes, even before the flying Kremlin touched the tarmac in the national capital, Delhi.
That's right. And I think the last time he spoke to an Indian news channel was way back in 2002. So it's over 2 decades. He's a man of who doesn't let his inner thoughts out too readily. So to have him speak so extensively certainly gives you an opportunity to get into the mind of the Russian president. And as we've seen in recent years, you can like him, hate him, you can't ignore Vladimir Putin. He remains a significant figure on the global stage. I think it's interesting in that interview, for example, where he's asked about G7. And he makes it very clear, I'm not interested in these global bodies. I'm happy to be out. Points suggest that Europe is in recession. Europe should be the one worried about its economic future and not Russia. Now, to some extent, that might be grandstanding, but the truth of the matter is Russia has shown that over the years, it's weathered many a storm. We can have our own views on whether the attack on Ukraine was justified or not. My own view is that Russia has much to answer for. But the fact is, at the end of the day, from an Indian perspective, Russia has been an important all-weather friend. There's no doubt about it. My only concern is Russia over the years, as a result of what the United States is doing at the moment, has also moved once again very close to China. We've seen an axis emerge between Russia and China in recent times, and that should concern us. I mean, it's all very well for us to have the bonhomie between India and Russia. We also expect the Russians to ensure that the Chinese recognize that they cannot take India for granted in any manner.
Right before.
You know, it's happened we just had a recent incident, more of a diplomatic incident involving an Arunachali citizen of India, and the way the Chinese treated her. We've seen what happened in Galwan. We have to be careful of the Chinese. And I think the Russians must be told that in unequivocal terms. I think the Russians recognize that. And I think they recognize India's concerns over China. They will also recognize India's concerns, I hope, over Pakistan. I mean, we had Shahbaz Sharif go to Moscow a few months ago, literally, seeking Russian armaments. I think, Russia...
Rajdeep, I just want to dip into the news break that we're just getting in right now. Prime Minister, it seems that Kremlin was a little surprised, pleasantly so, by the warmth of Prime Minister Modi, that he came in to receive President Putin. That is what is being reported right now, because you had the Prime Minister personally go receive President Putin, receive him with a warm hug, and it seems...
And we are also surprised over the MH number plate. I mean, I don't know why should a Maharashtra car be the main car for the two leaders to move in Delhi? So obviously some car is coming from Mumbai, or certainly with a Maharashtra number plate, which they are using to travel together.
Really what is seen in the Prime Minister's cavalcade usually, I don't know, this looks like a Fortuner, Toyota Fortuner, or a car which is a Toyota make. But Gaurav, take a moment to reflect on our world global exclusive. This is an interview where a CNN or BBC would give an arm for. And you had President Putin choose, India Today to give that interview, because once this interview airs today at 9 p.m., this is not just in context of Southeast Asia. This is a global interview which will make international headlines.
It already is making headlines, and you're absolutely right. But it's also because India Today has credibility. India Today puts facts first, and India Today does not peddle the agenda that some of the organizations that you mentioned may do for their respective governments and organizations. Here, every question was put to President Putin. Hard questions were put to President Putin, and he responded. No color and no taint was added, to whatever he said or whatever we asked. This was absolutely unscripted. Questions just kept flowing from one to the other to the third. It was scheduled for 60 minutes. It lasted well over 90 minutes. And that went on to show that both sides were very comfortable talking to each other because there was no agenda per se. Point one, preconceived agenda. Point two, when it comes to China, we must keep in mind India is no babe in the woods that we will let China, walk all over us. We've seen that in 2017 in Dolam. We've seen that in Galwan in 2020. And we've seen that subsequently. We also saw what happened at Tianjin SCO. There's furious backpedaling even by China. Not on core issues, but at least on the face of it, because China also realizes India's standing up for Indian interests first. Prime Minister Narendra Modi did not go running to America the way several leaders across the world did the moment tariffs were imposed. India had our red lines. Those red lines were made very clear, and respect for India has gone up across the world given the manner in which we've dealt with America so far, that we've not abandoned our all-weather friend Russia. Okay. That relationship is also growing, and we continue to engage with Europe, and our defense ties remain strong even with France. With America, well, the ball is in their court. Can they be trusted with military hardware and strategic weapons?
How you see the pieces on the chessboard moving diplomatically does seem to suggest it's the time of multipolarity. But I'm going to circle back, to our global exclusive that's going to air at 9 p.m. this evening. If you're seeing those visuals on your television screen of Prime Minister and President Putin riding side by side in that motorcade to Lok Kalyan Marg, they've had that moment before, way back at the SCO summit. And guess what? We at the India Today group did pose that question to President Putin. Was it pre-planned? Whose idea was it? Listen in.
very interesting question, because when you met Prime Minister Narendra Modi in SCO, and there was this picture and video of you and him going in a car, and we're showing it to our viewers right now. You were traveling in a car with him. Was it pre-planned, or how did it go about? How did it happen? And what did you discuss in the car?
Вы знаете, обсуждали текущие вопросы.
We were talking about just the current agenda. It was not pre-planned.
Вышли на улицу,
We just went outside into the street, and my car was there, and I suggested that we should get together, just, as a sign of friendship, for comradeship. There's nothing, no complicated orchestration, just as friends. We got together in one car, and we spoke. Along the road, there was always something to talk about. And, we had a conversation. We even sat in the car for quite some time. And then I said, yes, we should go because they're waiting for us. But there's nothing special about that. It just testifies to the fact that there's a lot we have to talk about. And these topics are of importance to us.
Right. President Sir, the fact that you're going to go to India, you just said that both leaders are going to cement the guarantees that you give each other. What are the kind of announcements that we can expect? We've heard about technology transfer. We've heard about trade enhancement. What are the solid announcements during this visit? And I ask you this is because the world, and you know who I mean, would be watching.
Ну, то, что мир будет следить за
Well, the
нашим
world
развитием здесь.
is going to be watching. I don't think there's anything special about that. Because, India is a great country, 1.5 billion people. It's a developing economy where the rate of growth is 7.7%. This is the first result in the world. Prime Minister Modi has managed to achieve that, and this says a lot. The Indian nation can take pride in. There's a lot to be proud of. Of course, there are always detractors, critics who believe that this could be done better, but that said, the result is evident. We've got a whole plan for cooperation which covers the most important spheres and fields. The most important ones are certainly oriented towards the future, and one of them is high technology. India and Russia are working together in outer space exploration, in energy, nuclear energy in particular, which is well known because, one of the leaders in that field, also shipbuilding, aircraft building. We have very many interesting directions which are oriented towards the future. Or let's take artificial intelligence. We'll probably talk about that later. But this is one of the key technologies of the future which is reshaping the world as we speak, because it manages to multiply things many-fold, but at the same time it creates certain challenges to be addressed, and we'll talk about all of that. And as Prime Minister Modi thinks and what I think, well, we'll choose what is of the greatest significance at this stage, and we'll help with that.
Agreement, sir?
Ну, конечно, сейчас
Well,
просто,
of course.
наверное, лучше не анонсировать.
But we should probably not announce them right now because, all of that is going to be announced in the course of the visit. We will present that to the public. And then the colleagues will present all of these agreements to us, and we'll have to give our final approval to these agreements.
All right, for more of that global world exclusive, you need to tune in to 9 p.m. on India Today. Like I said, viewers, this is an agenda-setting interview that's going to make international headlines. I want to just pull in, and I want to go back. Of course, that's the cavalcade pulling into Lok Kalyan Marg, but this particular frame, let's pull back to our world exclusive and that particular frame. This is the Kremlin. This is the place where you have President Putin who, decorates people. This is where most of the investitures happen. And right in front of that marquee statue that you see right in the middle. To give you more context on that, I'll pull in Sandeep, my colleague. Sandeep, would you want to talk to us a bit about what you find in the middle of this historic frame? Is a historic statue.
Nothing in Russia happens unscripted, and this exactly tells you is President Putin talking to two of the top journalists from India, giving India Today an exclusive interview, and in the middle you have a statue called Russia. It is a woman warrior in full armor of the 19th century. This is a statue that, incidentally, that was built in 1896. It is a Tsarist statue, and it portrays that warrior standing with a shield in her left hand and a sword in her right hand. She is in full armor, and she's protecting the emblems of Tsarist Russia, which is a scepter and it's a crown. And on the base of the statue is a slogan which says, "God save the Tsar." It is Imperial Russia. This is the statue of Imperial Russia at its height in the 19th century. So it's very interesting that President Putin would choose to put that statue right in the center of a very, very important interview, a very long one to India today. It's a world exclusive, and we are all waiting to hear what he has to say. But that statue, that position of that statue is extremely important. It's very significant. It talks about Russian pride. It talks about Russian martial prowess, and the fact that it harks back to a time when Russia was one of the most important powers in the world. And of course, this has continued. A lot of people will read many meanings into that statue. The fact is that, Preeti, if you look at all the Russian strategic missile submarines of the Yuri Dolgoruki class, they are not named after figures from the Soviet Union. One would normally think that President Putin, who was a colonel in the KGB during the USSR, during the heydays of the Soviet Union, would name things after, the figures of the Soviet Union. Not one of the dozen or so strategic missile submarines, the most important military platforms of the Soviet Union, are named after Soviet figures. They are all named after Imperial Russian figures, whether it is generals, it's princes, it's generalissimos. All of them are from Imperial Russia, and that is essentially Russia signaling not just to the near abroad, but to the world, that it is a power, it is a civilizational state, it is more than 1,000 years of history. And Preeti, this is very well known that President Putin is a big history buff, and he has been known to lecture, guests. He's been known to lecture, interviewers. So I'm very curious about what he must have told Anjana and Geeta about Russian history, particularly Russian military history. He is what many people say a Tsarist. He goes back to the origins of Russia, whether it is in Kievan Rus, where Russia began, in what is present-day Ukraine, going all the way up to the Grand Princes of Moscow, that's Ivan IV, who overthrew the Mongols, and then over 1,000 years of Russian history, Catherine, Empress Catherine, after whom that hall is named incidentally, where they are giving that interview. That is the Catherine Hall in the Kremlin. So everything is symbolic, everything is being chosen for a purpose. It's President Putin, it is the Kremlin, it is Russia, and it has had a history of, signaling its interests, signaling its proud history, its martial traditions. All of that you can see in that one frame in one of the most important interviews given by President Putin in the 21st century, Preeti.
You're bang on. And it's not just India that's looking at this interview. We've got, buyers across the country. We've got journalists across the country clocking down. And now it's just about an hour, 7 minutes where that interview, that world exclusive, actually airs. And like we pointed out, definitely an agenda-setting interview that will make headlines. He's spoken in depth, not just about the India-Russia context, not even just, the Southeast Asia context, but more so when it comes down to the global order. And that's most important at this point of time to address, especially where President Putin is concerned. So his first interview in that context. I want to bring in Gaurav back into this conversation, and then Gaurav and I are going to switch places, Gaurav, because right now you've got visuals coming in of the motorcade of the Prime Minister along with President Putin pulling in to 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. There is an informal dinner today. Then tomorrow is where business is going to be conducted. But if there is a money shot, if there has been one moment which seems to have surprised Kremlin as well in a pleasant way of the warmth that was portrayed by the Prime Minister, where he personally came down to receive the President, give him that hug, ride with him in the same car, in that motorcade to Lok Kalyan Marg.
This warmth is mutual. The respect is mutual. This is a friendship that actually goes back a long way. 2001, when Narendra Modi was Chief Minister of Gujarat, and he had accompanied then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee to Moscow for the summit. And incidentally, President Putin was then President Prime Minister Narendra Modi recalls that President Putin had treated him very well. He, went out of the way, engaged with him, spoke to him, gave him a lot of respect. And that's the time that this relationship actually developed as Gujarat and Akhtar Khan, becoming two partner states. And then when Prime Minister Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister of India in 2014, this relationship actually soared to new heights because both are very strong leaders, both history buffs, both talk about, President Putin, Russia first, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India first, and how they can dovetail this relationship, which has actually held both countries in great stead in the past. And then they've stood by each other through thick and thin. India did not abandon Russia. Remember when the S-400s were being taken, that time America threatened to impose sanctions on India under CAATSA. India still went ahead. 39,000 crore rupee deal for the S-400, $5.5 billion. India still went ahead, risked the CAATSA sanctions, ultimately got a waiver. And you've seen in Op Sindoor, they've held us in good stead. Even now, America wants to put a lot of pressure on India, including 25% additional tariffs. India's still going ahead and engaging with Russia. And we'll just watch for those conversations. President Putin just said that I'm going to meet my good friend Narendra Modi. That meeting with good friend Narendra Modi is happening right now. Let's see what comes out of this, Preeti.
Well, let's see what comes out of that. But yes, this is a new chapter in a relationship that has endured decades, because Russia and India have had a friendship that has constantly evolved over decades. But one thing has been a constant in that evolution. They have had each other's back. I want to cut across to what President Putin spoke in the context of the Russia-India friendship when we spoke with him at the Kremlin in Moscow. Listen in.
Dear viewers, hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Aaj Tak India Today and I'm Anjana Om Kashyap and we're at Kremlin today and you're about to witness history, a very historic moment. It is said that when two old friends meet, they have their private jokes. They have a lot of banter, they have a lot of fun and they have a bonhomie or camaraderie. But the others in the room might feel a little uncomfortable. And why do I say this? I say this because as the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, meets Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi, the world will be watching very, very closely. Vladimir Putin is undoubtedly one of the most influential politicians of the world whose decisions don't just affect Russia, but numerous nations across the world. He's a very compelling and enigmatic figure on the world stage. It just doesn't get more exciting than this.
Well, that's right, Anjana. Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan. We have with us a man who is known to be one of the world's longest-serving leaders. He's seen it all, through wars and economic recessions, from disintegration of countries to a changed world order, from Boris Yeltsin to Donald Trump, from Atal Bihari Vajpayee to Manmohan Singh to Narendra Modi. He's seen the world change right in front of him, and he's taken Russia through very turbulent times and yet has cemented his position as a force to reckon with. Thank you so much, President, for doing this with us. You're in conversation with India Today and Aaj Tak. That's the President of the Russian Federation for you.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on our network. How are you doing?
Надеюсь, что и вам у нас в России.
Well, I do hope that you find it great in Russia, in Moscow. You like Moscow and the Kremlin, where we're working.
Плану.
Well, as you can see, everything is according to plan. On the whole, we're happy with the economic situation. And what's most important, this month, I'm very happy that I'm going to meet, as you have just pointed out, my friend, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We agreed to meet in India a long time ago. There's a lot to talk about because the range of our cooperation with India is very huge. I'm not even talking about history of our relations, because this history is of a unique nature. And I would also like to point out that the path that India has traveled since gaining its independence, just over the 77 years, which is a very short span in the scale of history, and India has managed to travel a great way. And I'm going to dwell on that a little bit later. But, you know, when we live our daily lives, we hardly notice the changes that are currently afoot. It rarely happens when we notice these changes. But if we have a look back at the history, we'll see that what transpired in India is, to a large extent, a miracle. Well, I don't think there are many people even in India who know that the longevity, the life expectancy of India over the 77 years has
We will talk about the longevity in some time from now.
We're certainly going to talk about that. But be that as it may, our relations with India are developing across different ranges, different avenues. I'm very happy to have this chance to meet Prime Minister Modi. And not just business ties, but also personal ties.
Under 1 hour to go for that world exclusive interview of the Russian President Vladimir Putin by India Today's Geeta Mohan and Anjana Om Kashyap. And he's taken all questions. You would want to know what next when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war. What next when it comes to President Trump's post-Alaska meeting engagement with President Putin. Remember, President Trump's special envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, they were in Moscow, in Kremlin, when this interview was being filmed and, of course, was being shot. And then President Putin has just arrived in India. He's meeting his old friend Narendra Modi, and he said so. I'm looking forward to meeting my old friend Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India. Two very strong leaders. Their vision taking India-Russia relationship forward. So far, defense and strategy were key areas where this relationship was on an even keel. Now the effort is economic cooperation, business cooperation, people-to-people cooperation, because that's required to give a new impetus to this relationship. So what's their vision? There's a big business delegation that's accompanying the Russian president. We'll talk about that in greater detail. But first, all eyes across the world on this India Today exclusive interview. And I want to begin by asking you just to listen in to what President Putin spoke of about his visit to India and meeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
From Atal Bihari Vajpayee to Manmohan Singh to Narendra Modi, he's seen the world change right in front of him.
Undoubtedly one of the most influential politicians of the world. He's a very compelling and enigmatic figure on the world stage.
The President of the Russian Federation for you.
So what is the Russian president thinking about the Russia-Ukraine war? What's the road ahead? In this India Today world exclusive, global exclusive, we bring you an interview of unprecedented access and significance. For the first time on world television, Russian President Vladimir Putin, he speaks candidly and he's spoken at length. He was to speak for about an hour. This interview lasted more than 1.5 hours. The interview airs in about 55 minutes from now. President Putin, his comments on US President Donald Trump's tariff pressure tactics on India. The way America was trying to arm twist India not to be so close to Russia. Did that really work? When you look at those images at the Palam Technical Area in Delhi, when the Russian president's aircraft arrived, and the images that you will see tomorrow, clearly pressure tactics have not worked on India. It's a very clear It's a forceful message. President Putin underscores Russia's support for India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And of course, vice versa is something that you will see. So in this pointed observation, he emphasizes India is a major global power. India is no longer some British colony, no longer some former British colony, and that the West cannot talk down to India, cannot be addressed in the manner in which India may have been addressed by the West 77 years ago. And he's saying why, he's also explaining why. He says, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is not the one to give in to pressure. Listen in.
But my question to you now would be about defense. And India continues to be the biggest defense buyer. Roughly 38% of the market from Russia is bought by India. My question to you, sir, is in view of the sanctions by the US or the tariffs they have laid on India, the arm twisting methods that are being adopted, and I name it's America. How do you plan to circumvent all this? Will you pull back or push harder?
Но мне кажется, что и Индия, весь мир увидели.
Well, I think both the world
Индии нельзя разговаривать.
and India have seen that one cannot talk to India the way they used to talk to it 77 years ago. India is a great power, not an English or British colony, and everyone will have to take that into account.
Индийского правительства.
And moreover, the head of the Indian government, Prime Minister Modi, is not one to give in to pressure. The Indian nation can take pride in their Prime Minister. It's absolutely evident Prime Minister Modi has a firm position, which is not, however, confrontational, nor are we going to enter into confrontation with anyone. We are simply trying to defend our legitimate interests, and that is exactly what India is doing. What are the obstacles? There's transactions and payments, but more than 90% of our transactions are carried out in national currencies. There are certain difficulties, of course, because there are intermediaries, but there are solutions to that, because we can transition to using the systems for financial messaging systems, which we have offered by the Bank of Russia and our Indian counterparts. And we are doing this work steadily. And those who are taking steps to limit the economic cooperation of third parties sooner or later will incur losses. And I think once this understanding settles in completely and fully, then this practice of pressure from outside is gone.
So just under 55 minutes to go for that India Today World exclusive to play out. We will tell you what President Vladimir Putin is thinking. So 53 minutes to go, that biggest global exclusive. I also want to bring into this conversation General Deepak Kapoor, former Chief of Army Staff, joining me on this broadcast. With me, Sandeep Puneethan stays with me on this broadcast, as does my colleague Preeti Chaudhary. General Kapoor, welcome as always. Your view of what President Putin said about Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the fact that you cannot talk down to India today the way you could 77 years ago. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is not the one to give in to pressure.
Thank you, Gaurav. I tend to agree with what President Putin said, and it implies that India today is a growing power, and therefore it can hold its own on the world arena. And to that extent, President Putin has said that Prime Minister Narendra Modi would stand his ground if he has to in national interest, which I feel definitely he would do so, and ensure that the Indian interests are best served while interacting at the regional as well as the global level.
Okay, sir, permit me to interrupt you for a moment. These are live images that are coming in from 7 Lok Kalyan Marg residents of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, specially decked in Indian and Russian colors. The Prime Minister received the Russian President at his official residence, the 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. So not only is this pathway draped in the Indian tricolor and the Russian flag, but also the lights that you notice, the Indian flag and the Russian flag. The two very comfortable together. Preeti, both of them, the Indian Prime Minister and the Russian President, they've been friends for a very long time and they're very, very comfortable with each other.
You know, the history stands testimony to that, Gaurav, you know, because it's not just coming together of two leaders who are fairly very, very comfortable with each other. And, you know, if you're looking at photo opportunity and that one moment, it was there, you were reporting through it, you know, in where the SCO summit was concerned. So even there, because in diplomacy, so much is read in terms of just body language, and there seems to be a sense of ease here. Having said that, there's a larger context to it. This friendship is born out of a legacy, Gaurav, where the two countries, Russia and India, have stood by each other.
Okay, that's the first picture of the two of them together in the car, in Prime Minister Narendra Modi's car. So the first image that we showed you, the two of them getting together in that vehicle at Palam Technical Area. And this is a selfie. It's actually a picture that's been taken by somebody on the front seat of the Toyota. And they're very, very comfortable together. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian President Vladimir Putin. In Tianjin, we saw President Putin wait quite some time for the Prime Minister to arrive, and then the two sat in the car and had a long conversation, and then they drove out together. India Today's Geeta Mohan and Anjana Om Kashyap put that question to President Putin, and in about 50 minutes from now, you'll hear the answer. He explains why he waited for Prime Minister Narendra Modi, why they spoke in the car, and how they traveled together to that destination. Let me also tell you, Kremlin has just reported that they were pleasantly surprised to see Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the airport to receive President Putin. They're expected India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, to receive the Russian president. But Prime Minister Narendra Modi was there to receive him, and they traveled together in the Prime Minister's car. The signal to the world is ye dosti hum nahi chhodenge. Kitna bhi pressure dunya bana le. Sandeep, the world may want to mount a lot of pressure on India, impose another additional 25% tariffs, but then ye dosti hum nahi todenge. That's the signal that goes out from New Delhi tonight.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And just look at that photograph. Look at that bonhomie. Look at that camaraderie. It's like, Jay and Viru literally from Sholay. And, that is the kind of bonhomie, the chemistry that these two leaders share. And Gaurav, very importantly, today is Navy Day. And I have to raise this here, the fact that it was 54 years back tonight that the Indian Navy carried out one of the most devastating naval attacks in the 20th century, when they used Russian-supplied equipment, Russian missile boats, Russian P-15 missiles to inflict a very big, catastrophic naval defeat on the Pakistan Navy.
They bombed
sank
Karachi.
3 ships. They bombed Karachi, and this was it. December 4th, 1971. It was this night, 54 years back, that the Indian Navy made its fiery debut in this war, the 14-day war against Pakistan. And that war, again, Gaurav, could not have been possible but for Russian hardware. So you're literally looking at the anniversary of that great moment 54 years back. And it continues, Gaurav. That support from Russia continues with the BrahMos missiles, with the S-400, and let's not forget, with the diplomatic support that Russia gives us on the world stage. It was the vetoes.
So give me a moment as I try and bring in a perspective from Moscow. I have Fred Wire joining me from Moscow. Fred, welcome. How is Moscow viewing this? We're getting opinion from the world, but I would want to understand from you, sir, how is Moscow viewing President Putin's visit to India?
Well, it's always a big deal. I mean, these summits have been a regular feature since the 90s. Post-Soviet feature, and it has always loomed large on Russian diplomatic agenda. That relationship is solid, and you've had a lot of people on talking about that. But it is changing, and one of the things that is driving that change is the Ukraine war, which has been a catalyst that's accelerating all the global shifts that have been taking place. And one of the things that's happened is that Russia has decided that its former aspirations to integrate economically, to some extent politically, especially with Europe. It was a big thing in the first decade of the Putin era. That's finished. The experience that Russia has had, especially with Europe, and it goes on to this moment, has put Russia off Europe and also severed its economic links with it. So Putin comes to India with a whole new perspective about Russia's future. The war is winding to a close, and he is looking beyond that to the shape of a global order, Russia's place in it, and who its friends will be. And it's not a surprise that top of the agenda is India. This is, I mean, all the good reasons. India's dynamic economy, its long-term friendship and understanding of Russia, all these things. But there are also a host of untapped potential in the economic sphere that for all you can say about the great relationship the two countries have had.
Mentioned the untapped potential of economic relationship, because so far there's been a lot on defense, there's been a lot on energy, but on trade, on people to people, on business, this visit of President Putin makes that effort. But Fred, request you to stay with me. Deepak Kapoor is with me. I want to quickly cut across to Washington, D.C. Seema Sirohi is a senior journalist and analyst, wrote a best-selling book, Friends with Benefits, on India-US relationship. Seema, welcome. This could have been President Trump's moment. He was to come to India for the Quad Summit. He chose to punish India, and President Putin, in that exclusive interview to India Today, and you'll hear that in a moment, Seema, he made it very clear America's following double standards, or words to that effect. America continues to procure from Russia, but is penalizing India for doing so. So how would President Putin's visit to India be viewed in Washington, D.C., Seema?
Thank you, Gaurav. I think, in short, it will be viewed with some concern, especially if new defense deals are signed. But at the same time, President Trump has treated India in a very shabby manner. He's put the maximum tariffs, on India compared to any other country. So the relationship with the US has gone down, and it's in a kind of holding spot, I would say. They'll be watching this visit with very keen eyes, but I think they will get the message that India wants to engage with all major countries. Nobody can sort of veto India's relations with another major partner, and Russia has been a very major partner for India over the years. For Mr. Putin, the message would be that he has options. India is a major option. Now, you were talking about the economic relationship between Russia and India. I think we should remember that the trade deficit is in Russia's favor to the tune of $65 billion. Yes. That's not a very happy thing. So, of course, India is keen that Russia should buy more from India, and that, I think, would be a point of difference between the two sides. But overall, this is a very important visit. The message is going out to Europe and to the US that India is standing firm in its attempt to have friends with all major poles in the world right now.
And nobody can talk down to us. President Putin said so in as many words. Seema, stay with me. I want to bring in Deepak Kapoor. It's just 42 minutes to go for that India Today World exclusive, because 42 minutes from now, you will hear the Russian president speak and give out his worldview. And there are very important signals there for Europe, for Ukraine, for the United States, and of course, for friends like India, and especially India. General Kapoor, would India risk additional sanctions if India were to go in for 5 more regiments of S-400s and look at the S-500s and look at the Su-57s. There are some who say that we are looking at 2 squadrons of Su-57 as an interim.
Gaurav, let me say this, that India has always followed a policy of strategic autonomy. And that is something which has carried through right since independence. I think that's a policy which will hold India in good stead. Yes, you're right. It may face a little more difficulty when additional S-400 missile air defense systems are asked for, or S-500 air defense systems, or Su-57 production is talked about. But that's something India has to stay with, and therefore it is in India's national interest to be able to go through with those agreements with Russia and carry on ensuring that its strategic autonomy is maintained all throughout.
General, if I may, given your long career as a young lieutenant all the way to the chief of the army staff, you've operated Russian equipment extensively and also Swedish equipment, the Bofors 155mm howitzers. I want to understand from you, if we were to talk about Russia as the reliable defense partner and the United States, the problems that the Air Force has had with the G404 engines then and now, Sea King and Sea Harrier spares after the Pokhran test, virtually the entire fleet was grounded. The ANTPQ-37 radars that did not come and cost us in Kargil. Who would you say is a more reliable strategic partner? And would that weigh in when India decides whether we want to go in for the F-35s or the Su-57s?
Gaurav, I'd like to say this, that I have, during 1971 operations, operated with the Russian equipment. Right since then, I have seen the Russian equipment in the not only in the Indian Army, but also the Air Force and the Navy as well. If I may say so, Russia has been an extremely important strategic partner who has stood by India throughout, whether in the military sphere or at the diplomatic level, even at the Security Council of the United Nations. So Russia has been definitely a partner who has stayed with us throughout. And just because of all that, the acquisition of weapon systems that are there with India today are approximately 2/3 of Russian origin. So there may be a problem about compatibility of weapons between the Western technology weapons and the Russian. So even if we are looking for any kind of changes, it's going to take time. All these changes have to take place over a period of acceptance by the services after trials, etc., which is a long drawn-out process. So to that extent, we are still dependent to a large extent on Russian weapon systems, and their support has to continue. While the overall content of the Russian equipment may have gone down from this period of 2012 to 2016 from 68% to 59%, we are still quite dependent on the Russian equipment and their spares, etc., to carry on. And let me say this, that in Op Sindoor, we've been able to use that equipment to advantage, and it has stood by us very well. So in the future, I see this continuation of this relationship and assistance from Russia, especially in the field of getting a fresh lot of aircraft, naval ships, as well as within the Army, S-500 air defense systems, as well as additional tanks like we are manufacturing today, the T-90 tank.
The T-72 and the T-90 Bhishma. Sir, give me a moment, 37 minutes to go for that big India Today world exclusive to come. And Preeti, if I could draw you in for a moment, President Putin saying Prime Minister Narendra Modi is not a man you can put under pressure. India today is not the India of 77 years ago. That's a signal actually to Europe and the United States of America that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will not buckle under pressure.
Bang on, Gaurav. You're very right there because, this is messaging, this is global messaging, but this also stems from the fact that today you have a Russia which stands globally isolated where at least the West is concerned. So you see that Asia pivot where Russia is looking at India, and which India is an old friend. Russia is also looking at China, but China will bring its scale. India will bring it global legitimacy. But for India as well, on our part, we are looking at Russia primarily. I think our biggest reason would be global neutrality. That where the geopolitics of the world is concerned, especially where you're talking about China vis-a-vis India, that Russia remains geopolitically neutral, having its interests lie in China as well. So it is, in a way, a symbiotic relationship which is built on past history. And therefore, you see that kind of bonhomie which stems from comfort because Russia has always been on our side of the divide in the historical context. But there is that current layer to it as well, which one can't really deny.
I will get Ambassador Trigunayat to respond to that. 35 minutes to go for that India Today world exclusive to come up. But before that, what's the end game in Ukraine? Because that's the question on everybody's mind. While you hear that interview at 9 o'clock, let me give you a teaser, a little trailer. Listen into what President Trump said. Fred, coming to you in Moscow in just a moment, but listen in to President Putin on the end game when it comes to Russia-Ukraine conflict.
What is the end game for Vladimir Putin in Ukraine?
Так я же сказал.
Well, I've just said it.
Мы признали вот эти...
We have recognized, listen,
Мы 8 лет не
for
признавали
8 years we did not recognize
самопровозглашенных
the self-declared republics.
лет.
For 8 years,
провозгласили
they
независимость.
have declared the
А мы
independence.
старались наладить
And we were
отношения
trying
с остальной частью
to build
Украины.
relations between the rest of Ukraine
Потом,
and
когда
these
поняли, что это
republics.
невозможно,
When
что
we
их просто уничтожают,
understood that it's
вынуждены
impossible,
были
that they're simply
признать
being destroyed, we were
Причем не
forced to
просто
recognize them, and not simply
в части
recognize them
в
as their
рамках
partial territory,
административных
but within
границ,
administrative
когда они
borders,
существовали еще в
when they
советское
existed
время,
back in the Soviet times,
а потом во времена независимой
and later
Украины,
during the times of the independent Ukraine,
обретения
after it
независимости,
gained
в рамках
independence,
административных границ.
in the
И мы сразу Украине
administrative
сказали,
limits.
украинским войскам, люди не
Lines.
хотят с вами жить. Они вышли на референдум, проголосовали
So
за
the
независимость.
people, the voters,
Выведите свои
came to
войска.
the referendum
И никаких
and voted
военных действий.
for everyone to withdraw troops from there and not to conduct
Предпочитали
any armed
воевать. Ну, вот сейчас
actions there.
завоевались.
But they preferred to wage war. And now
Всё к этому
it all came to a head. And it all comes to one thing.
Вооруженным путем освободить
Either we do that
эти территории,
through
либо украинские
military action will liberate the territories, or the Ukrainian troops will withdraw and leave these territories and stop killing people there.
So I've given you a glimpse. The president has an endgame in mind. 9 o'clock. Just about 34 minutes from now. 9 o'clock. Just about 34 minutes from now. That big India Today world exclusive plays. You want to hear what one of the most powerful men in the world thinks. I want to bring in Ambassador Trigunayat for more on this. Ambassador, in your view, Ambassador Trigunayat for more on this. Ambassador, in your view, there are many who say President Putin a change that Europe doesn't want to acknowledge. The American delegation was in Moscow. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was in Moscow. The Russian president was there. Nobody from Europe was there. What does that indicate, Ambassador?
Well, this indicates, number one, that Russia and Europe have got this kind of a dividing line, which will be very difficult to fill. And this also goes in the historic context between them. I mean, empire times, you know that. The Russians were the ones who defeated Hitler, the Germany, in a sense that wounds. There has been problem with Japan. There has also been problem with France. Napoleon was defeated in Russia.
Yes.
So I think that Britishers also have the same kind of problem. So that's why you see that this is something going much deeper. But today's time and age, and I have lived in Russia, so I know that the Russians generally identify themselves with Europeans. That's also true. And they want to be close to Europe. But unfortunately, today the line has been drawn, which is very difficult to fill.
At the same time, no isolation, I don't think there is an isolation because this is Russians realize that Europe is not going to be the same again. Therefore, they have moved towards Eurasia. And that is one area. And Africa, they are very much in a big way going into Africa. In fact, yesterday only I saw the Sudanese have offered them another port. They are also back in Middle East with Syria again. They are in action with the Saudis, with the Emiratis. So you can't say that they have been isolated in any way. I mean, UAE has become their entrepot for all the trade, despite these sanctions that the West countries have imposed.
Yes.
As far as India is concerned, it remains a very steady and a substantive partnership and a strategic partnership, and which we have seen today when he arrived in Delhi and Prime Minister Modi personally went to receive him, and they again drove together. So this has been very much evident. So now more than half of the world's population, if you were to see simply the countries, are also friends with Russia. So therefore, in that sense, it is, I think it will not be right to say that Russia has been isolated. Of course, there will always be a geopolitical contestation, but the Americans are also playing their own cards with the Russians on the bilateral front. And the secondary front is, of course, the Ukrainian war. They want to end so that the irritant is gone.
So let me bring in Fred Weil into this to understand, is Europe actually feeling left out in a way, Europe and Ukraine and some countries in Europe, because America is engaging with Russia, America is also engaging at some levels with China, America is also engaging with India, and they're trying to find a solution. President Putin said so himself, when a question was asked, when India Today asked him a question about what he thought of President Trump and his efforts. So 30 minutes from now, you'll hear his answer. But Fred, your take, is Europe increasingly getting isolated?
Well, in this case, regarding the Ukraine war, it's been clearly sidelined. We've watched this process over recent weeks, and the Europeans did try to insert themselves into Trump's new peace offensive. They produced at least 3 drafts of what they deemed to be a peace settlement plan. And each one of them contains so many spoilers, like points that are absolutely impossible to be accepted in Moscow. And so you saw this very clearly in the talks that occurred on Monday in the Kremlin with Trump's 2 emissaries talking with Putin for 5 hours. They were supposed to fly on to Brussels, where they would meet with Vladimir Zelensky and Europeans, and they chose not to. They just got on the plane and flew back to Washington. So there is absolutely no doubt that the Americans have given up on Europe as an interlocutor in this process. And whatever final settlement is going to be made, and we must hope it will be, it's going to be Putin, Trump, and Zelensky sorting it out. The Europeans are on the sidelines. They can produce as many drafts and make as many magical incantations about how things should be as they want. I think they're going to be ignored. And it is possible. I think it's very likely. I feel optimistic for the first time in a long time that this process can lead to the necessary compromises that will bring this war to an end. And the main reason is that the Americans are dangling various incentives to Putin that he wants. That is normalization of relations with the United States, trade and business cooperation with the United States. Again, Europe's interests aren't being included in that in any way.
But on that very important aspect, President Putin doesn't want to let go of any territory, and 27 minutes to go for that big India Today World Exclusive. But Seema Sirohi, across the Atlantic, is that how you view it in the United States of America? Europe increasingly getting sidelined. President Trump, President Putin will directly engage with President Zelensky and try and find a solution? Or President Zelensky will always have the support of at least some European leaders, Germany, France, United Kingdom, and, this war will become endless?
Well, I agree with Fred that Europe has kind of been sidelined. they have made big promises and they have egged on Zelensky to keep fighting, but they know that they have limitations of their own. Now, President Trump is dealing directly with the Russians. So, Europe has actually a lot of stake in this whole thing, but no power to sort of enforce what it wants. Zelensky has also started to say he's sort of, modified his position to wanting a dignified peace. He's willing to make compromises. Now, the question is how long it takes for both sides to come together. But it's true that the US is kind of washing its hands off this war. If this time it doesn't work, people are saying over here in Washington that President Trump is just going to give up on this. I'm not sure. I'm sure that Putin realizes that. So he will also make moves that sort of push towards peace, if it means compromises on his side. So let's see how it unfolds, but it's a situation is very unpredictable. But
It indeed is. But from his
Europeans are
answers,
feeling.
yes, from his answers 25 minutes from now, you will get a fair idea of which direction he wants to move forward in. We'll see if more emerges from that after his interaction with Prime Minister Narendra Modi over dinner tonight and during the dialogue tomorrow. Sandeep, are we to then believe that India-Russia relationship and India-US relationship are being held hostage by the Russia-Ukraine conflict? We can't move forward in either direction because it'll invite more sanctions if we were to move closer to Russia. And we cannot trust the Americans, given those sanctions, that we don't move forward in that direction much either.
Well, absolutely, Gaurav. And, if you look at it in the 21st century, especially post-Pokhran, India-US ties had been on the mend, and we got a strategic partnership going with the United States. And we have never been asked to choose between the West or Russia in the way that we've been asked to do now. And this is a big, big problem for India and its strategic autonomy when it comes to being asked to choose between the Russian Federation or the United States. And we have chosen this path of strategic autonomy. And there's no doubt about the fact that it is the Russia-Ukraine war that has imposed the maximum pressure on our relationships, both with the Russian Federation as well as the United States. Because, Gaurav, while you're talking about the arms that we're getting from Russia, these come with a cost of possible sanctions that the United States could impose, exactly like we saw a couple of years back. And let's not kid ourselves, Gaurav, in 2025, the sanctions are not going to be of the kind of CATSA that we saw a few years back, which we could evade. Because now the United States will try to pressure us, will try to pressure Russia by whatever means possible. And we've seen the kind of language, we've seen the kind of actions that the United States has embarked upon with these kind of tariffs, unprecedented tariffs that they've imposed on India. So everything is on the table, literally, Gaurav. And this is something that this all can be traced down to the Russia-Ukraine war and the pressure the West wants to bring on Russia.
Could the West and could the United States be shooting itself in the foot? Because India today put that question on rupee-ruble trade to President Putin. That full interview in 23 minutes from now. But I want you to listen into an excerpt. I'll bring in Ambassador Trigonath and my guests once again on that. But listen into President Putin on the rupee-ruble trade.
The biggest thing when you have these blocks is how do you make it economically viable? Are we looking at alternative payment systems? Is there going to be a BRICS currency? Or are we looking at alternative payments in terms of national currencies? Rupee ruble.
Moving towards de-dollarization, basically.
Well, there is no need for haste. And if there is no hurry, then you will avoid many grave mistakes. Let's have a look at Europe. They created the Euro system and they involved in that Eurozone several countries that were economically unprepared for a single currency. Hence, problems with regulating a number of issues related to social system. You cannot simply work with the national currency because there is one single currency, hence problems with the budget. We do not have this goal of building a single currency in BRICS at this stage and point. This has to be done very carefully, prudently.
And we need to use national currencies. We need to use wider the capacity of the new development bank of BRICS. For example, we've proposed to create a new investment platform that would use electronic payments with a minimum capital of $100 billion to begin with, in order to create conditions for joint investment both in our economy and the economies of the developing global south.
So 20 minutes to go for that India Today world exclusive interview with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's right now in 7 local. He left Moscow at the Kremlin. So 20 minutes to go for that interview. Ambassador Trigonayat, de-dollarization doesn't appear to be happening in a hurry. Is that the impression you also get from this conversation that India Today had with President Putin? But rupee-ruble trade, the Mir system and India's rupee system, do you see that deal happening, forward movement there?
Well, as you know, that nearly 85 to 90% of our trade with Russia is being settled through national currencies, and rest through UAE and other mechanisms. And we have mastered this since the Soviet times, if you remember, the Russia rupee-ruble trade. Yes. So that is a mechanism that works, and that is being worked upon. And now that we have the Bank of Russia opening their office in Delhi, I think this will be smoothed out even further. Now, as you know, that the dollar is essentially some kind of a sovereign identity of the United States. So therefore, they feel that anything that is dented is direct impact on their sovereignty. And that's why the de-dollarization is really a red rag for the Americans, especially for President Trump. But the fact remains is that they are the ones who started weaponization of financial instruments themselves. And they have created this spate of countries rushing for bilateral currencies and national currency mechanisms. Nobody wants to undermine the dollar regime, but at the same time, countries have to adopt methodologies to protect themselves, and India has done. UPI with 23 countries, actually, we have signed the agreements. And we should perhaps expect one of the agreements on UPI and the Russian system to be signed this time. But that is what is going to help the Russians also in getting more tourists from India. That's one of the major drawbacks at the moment as far as the tourism is concerned, apart from the trade.
Okay. And Seema Sirohi, would you see America weaponize this further against India in case India were to procure additional regiments of the S-400, go in for the S-500, go in for the Su-57s? Not that it's happening overnight, but will all of this depend on peace between Russia and Ukraine, or India risks additional sanctions?
See, I know there's a lot of excitement around President Putin's visit to India, but I think the government of India would not want the fallout from this visit to affect the US relationship too much. So, because you might notice that while President Trump has gone all out to punish India, the government of India has been extremely careful in what it has said over the last few months. So what India wants is to maintain a good partnership with the US and ride it out for the next 3 years. Now, if Russia will push for the Su-57s, no doubt. But and the Americans are pushing for their 5th-gen fighters for India to buy. That's a huge decision. And if there is any announcement on the Russian planes during this visit, I think it'll not go down well in Washington, that's for sure. But whether they impose more sanctions, that remains to be seen, because it'll affect other parts of the relationship and other equations, including with Russia, because Trump is trying to make peace with on the Ukraine war. So
absolutely.
He's deployed.
So the Quad summit is not happening right now. The Quad summit is not happening, but there's a Quad anti-terror meeting that's happening in Delhi right now. Even as the Russian president is here, the Russian defense minister, health minister, all of them are here. There's also a Quad summit, Quad officials meeting on anti-terrorism also happening. Fred, the last 30 seconds I have on this part of the show, I want to understand from you, what does Russia expect to take back from this summit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Putin?
Incredibly important. All the things that people are saying about the messaging of this summit are awfully important to Russia, because it is sort of still beleaguered in the line of fire. It is experiencing the biggest wave of sanctions ever leveled against the country. So that's important. But I think Putin seriously wants to cement a new, higher level relationship with India, with in-depth economic relations. I think you'll see a lot of overtures from the Russians to solve problems like that trade deficit, to make Russia more friendly to Indian workers and business investors. They're very conscious of this. They're very, I think they're eager to get this relationship on a new footing. I think they believe the Ukraine war is going to be ended soon. I think they're right, and that episode will be behind us, and there'll be a whole new world. And Putin really wants to set the groundwork for that.
Okay, so just 9 minutes to go for that India Today World Exclusive coming up, Sandeep. And perhaps more access for Indian pharmaceuticals, healthcare, agricultural products to Russia. That's something that India is also keenly looking at, Sandeep.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And the aim is to diversify beyond the traditional areas that we have is energy and defense. And we're looking at other areas like, as you mentioned, pharmaceuticals. Shipping is another major area of cooperation, Gaurav. The government of India has a vision to become a major shipping power in terms of manufacturing its own ships, and unveiled a very, very big plan. And Russia plans to build its ships in India. There's a lot of collaboration that's on there, especially on the Arctic route, the northern route. There are multiple routes that India and Russia are discussing where they can actually collaborate and all that. So the aim is to get to that 100 billion figure by the end of this decade, Gaurav. And I'm sure they would want to have a more balanced relationship between India and Russia, the trade figures, rather than this hugely skewed trade deficit that's usually in favor of Russia, and to move away from those traditional areas to go into other new areas like pharma, electronics, automobiles, another very big area. Yes. President Putin has praised India's automobile sector repeatedly, and he's spoken about how India has created this huge automobile sector all by itself in the last couple of decades. Those are areas that we can talk about. The fact is that a lot of Indian manufacturers do not have a presence in Russia. Why is that? Those are areas of cooperation that can be worked out. So literally, Gaurav, the sky is the limit. And this is something that we have to see in the next couple of hours. We will know once and for all where the India-Russia relationship is headed in the next couple of years.
Not even the sky. Now, outer space is the limit, given the fact that outer space cooperation is also something that both countries are looking at. So 7 minutes, 47 seconds to go for that.
Have firmly on our side.
Right.
The fact that you've got a Pakistan
Rajdeep,
run by...
May I just, you can come in and reflect. You have President Putin, he's 73, very, very fit, practically running down the stairs there. He will be greeted by the Prime Minister there. who is waiting for him. What kind of greeting will that be? Will it be a namaste? Will it be a firm handshake? Will there be a hug? Optics are everything, where diplomacy comes into question. A gentle smile, and it is a handshake and a warm hug. So that is possibly, Gaurav, the money shot for the morning tomorrow newspapers, that hug enjoyed by the Prime Minister and President Putin. A firm handshake and a quick hug, and then, of course, that photo opportunity. In all probability, they will be escorted to one car, and that is the second moment where the Prime Minister of India and the President of Russia would be traveling together en route to Kalyan.
So that's the Air Officer commanding Palam Technical Airbase, Palam Airbase, who's greeted the Russian President, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, introducing the Russian President to his entire team. That also includes Russian diplomats and Indian diplomats who are a part of this team. It's a big delegation that the Russian President is also carrying. Then, of course, the Tri-Services Guard of Honor. You're absolutely right that hug is the money shot for now, but there will be multiple hugs between now and the 9 p.m. tomorrow. The traditional Indian dance to welcome the Russian President. He will enjoy the music. Perhaps there's some music in that. We'll know in a moment from now. And if I may, President Putin is maybe a pariah for some in Europe. He just went to Alaska on the invitation of the American President Donald Trump. And President Donald Trump just sent a team to meet him in Moscow at the Kremlin. Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff just met him. They're trying to find a solution.
All right, so there is a fair bit of music, and you have President Trump, who took that 10 seconds to acknowledge that little dance sequence that you see for President Trump. And understandably, this is the full red carpet, the protocol meted out to a head of state, and that's exactly what we're witnessing on our television screen. Multiple layers to this visit, very, very important. And for now, that will be the money shot for tomorrow morning's newspapers, where you have President Trump hugging the Indian Prime Minister. But Sandeep and Rajdeep, I'm going to bring you back in, and Gaurav as well. Sandeep, with what we were speaking of earlier, there is, all right, so it does seem both of them will be traveling in the same car. You have Prime Minister Modi as well as President Trump.
President Putin.
President Putin, sorry, driving alongside all the way to Lok Kalyan Marg. So this is what we were expecting, and that's what's happened. And that question was raised in that super exclusive global interview that we've had with President Putin at the Kremlin in Moscow about the SCO moment where they were traveling together. And he went ahead and said that it wasn't scripted, but he wanted it to happen. He's the one who engineered it at that point of time. So that's a bit of a tidbit from that interview.
And this is the Prime Minister's car. This is the Indian car that they're traveling in. And, look at the officials who are all taking selfies, and his team. Everyone wants a selfie of that moment, the Russian flag and the Indian flag on the Prime Minister's official Jeep. They're traveling in that SUV together to 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, where there's a private dinner in honor of the Russian president. And then they take this relationship forward. So these are signals not just to people in both their respective countries, Preeti, but also to the world. Ye dosti hum nahi todenge. That's that big message that goes out.
Well, that's the big message that goes out, and one mustn't forget that Russia has been, over decades, a long-standing partner of India. There's a historical context to it. It's a relationship that has evolved, especially in the times of multipolarity and the current global order. Another question, that he was asked, and Rajdeep and Sandeep, I'll bring you in, and Rajdeep, if you'd want to take that, interesting question that was raised, by us to President Putin on the multipolarity and a new global order that could be setting in. That's one answer everybody will stay tuned to at this point of time, with possibly Russia, China, and the Axis coming together where these countries are concerned.
Look at, I was speaking to a European diplomat. Look at it from the European point of view. They've said, we see the pictures of Prime Minister Modi, President Putin, and the Chinese President Xi together, and we have our own views on it. But from our perspective and from our strategic objectives, that becomes important. We need to be seen in the present atmosphere as a country that has been able to navigate a very delicate balancing act between the United States, with whom there are trade negotiations going on, even as this visit is going on. The trade negotiators, I'm told, are coming to India next Thursday. So you've got trade negotiators coming next Thursday, and you've got Mr. Putin, who's also got his own agenda that also goes to trade and defense. So for India, the challenge is to balance the two without falling off the rope.
Rajiv, coming right back to you, I just want to cut across to Amit Bhardwaj. He has some visuals coming in right now. Over to you, Amit.
Well, the visuals that we were waiting for, these visuals are coming straight from the Palam Technical Airport, and the first vehicle that's going to be out from here will be part of the Prime Minister Modi's carcade, and from here on, PM Modi is taking his friend President Putin to 7 LKM in most likelihood, where the dinner will be also hosted. The gates of the Palam Airport is open, and the first car, the pilot car, is out. And after that, the security carcades would be coming out. So those visuals are on your screen. This is Prime Minister Modi's carcade. And in the white car, which you will see in any moment from now, is Prime Minister Modi and President Putin in that particular car. So as we were talking about the repeat of the SCO visuals, possibility of repeat of the SCO visuals, that's happening right now on your screens, and Prime Minister Modi's car is leaving right now the Palam Airport. These are visuals on your screen where PM Modi along with President Putin is leaving from the Palam Airport, and that's the car of Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's white car is out. PM Modi and President Putin are out of the Palam Airport. So the visuals that we were waiting for, the repeat of the SEO summit, those visuals came from the Palam Airport tarmac, where, I beg your pardon, PM Modi hugged President Putin, and after that, both of them boarded the same car, PM Modi's car, the white car that we were showing to our viewers at this point in time from Palam Airport. That was Prime Minister Modi's car. So you had the pilot cars and the security carcade. And after that, PM Modi, along with President Putin, in the same car. So a repeat of the SCO moment here in India. And these visuals are certainly going to be recorded in the history as the symbol of strong bond and bonhomie that India and Russia share, and how we are going to strengthen it from here on. The trade between India and Russia has increased many folds in the past 4 to 5 years. There's a focus on the defense sector that Russia would also want India to increase the deal upon, and India also looking at better negotiations. And the carcade of the Indian officials, the MEA was here, S. Jaishankar, other officials from the Russian embassy, the Russian defense attaché, all of them are leaving the Palam Airport, and they would be, heading towards ITC Moria as the place where President Putin is leaving, will be staying here. And PM Modi is all set to host a very private dinner for President Putin at 7 LKM. So the visuals from the Palam Airport, whatever we expected and told our viewers were actually at play at Palam Airport. You have
you are correct, Amit. You are correct.
Aircraft,
all right, let's cut across to Pranay for a brief while. My colleague who's joining us from local Myanmar. Pranay, it does seem that the motorcade of the Prime Minister, and it's a repeat deja vu moment like the SCO summit, where you have the Prime Minister ride alongside President Putin to local Myanmar. Can you give us what the next 30 hours for President Putin will look like, and what will be on the table for discussion? Of course, we're talking about
Aaj Tak India Today, and I'm Anjana Om Kashyap, and we're at Kremlin today, and you're about to witness history, a very historic moment. It is said that when two old friends meet, they have their private jokes, they have a lot of banter, they have a lot of fun, and they have a bonhomie or camaraderie. But the others in the room might feel a little uncomfortable. And why do I say this? I say this because as the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, meets Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi, the world will be watching very, very closely. Vladimir Putin is undoubtedly one of the most influential politicians of the world, whose decisions don't just affect Russia, but numerous nations across the world. He's a very compelling and enigmatic figure on the world stage. It just doesn't get more exciting than this.
Well, that's right, Anjana. Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan. We have with us a man who is known to be one of the world's longest-serving leaders. He's seen it all, through wars and economic recessions, from disintegration of countries to a changed world order, from Boris Yeltsin to Donald Trump, from Atal Bihari Vajpayee to Manmohan Singh to Narendra Modi. He's seen the world change right in front of him, and he's taken Russia through very turbulent times and yet has cemented his position as a force to reckon with. Thank you so much, President, for doing this with us. You're in conversation with India Today and Aaj Tak. That's the President of the Russian Federation for you.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on our network. How are you doing?
Надеюсь, что и вам у нас в России.
Well, I hope you'll enjoy your stay in Russia.
Москва нравится, Кремль, где мы сейчас с вами работаем.
Hope that you like Moscow and the Kremlin, where we're currently collaborating together.
По плану, в целом мы довольны ситуацией.
As you see, everything is going on as planned. On the whole, we're satisfied with the current economic situation. Most importantly, I'm delighted to be meeting, as you've mentioned, my friend Prime Minister Modi.
Мы давно договаривались увидеться именно в Индии.
We have made a specific arrangement to do so in India because there are numerous topics on which we need to talk, and our collaboration with India spans an extensive array. And of course, the unique nature of our relationship adds another layer of significance.
Ну и хотел бы сказать, что и путь, который прошла Индия с момента завоевания.
I also want to highlight that India's progress over the past 77 years since gaining independence, an extremely brief span in historical terms, has been substantial indeed, and India has truly come a long way in development.
Знаете, когда мы живем в текущей...
I will discuss this further below. You know, as we go about our daily lives, we often fail to notice the changes happening right before our eyes. We scarcely ever take note of them.
Если посмотреть чуть-чуть назад, то
Yet, if you glance even slightly into the past and reflect on what has occurred in India, it's almost like a miracle. For example, few people recognize that life expectancy in India has nearly doubled during this period.
We will talk about longevity in some time from now.
Да, хорошо, поговорим обязательно, но во всяком случае...
We will definitely discuss that. Anyway, our relationship with India is advancing in numerous fields. It's a pleasure to meet Prime Minister Modi again, with whom we have both a professional and a personal, friendly relationship.
So, may I ask you, you just talked about the Indo-Russian ties, and it dates back to almost more than 7 decades. Dosti in Hindi and Druzhba in Russian. This friendship dates back to more than 7 decades. My question to you is, how do you assess the strength of this friendship in today's time? And what would you say about Prime Minister Narendra Modi and to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, whom you call your dost?
О премьер-министре.
About the Prime Minister.
Yeah?
Вы знаете,
You know, the world is evolving rapidly, and this pace keeps getting faster, which is plainly visible to all.
вот это все видят очень хорошо.
The global configuration is changing, with new centers of power emerging, and the global power landscape is changing too. Therefore, it's crucial to ensure stability among major nations, since this forms the groundwork for gradual progress in both bilateral and international relations.
Она создает определенную базу, основу.
In this context, our collaborative endeavors with Prime Minister Modi carry significant weight because they transcend our mutual ties.
Работа вместе с премьер-министром Моди имеет очень большое значение.
Given its direct relevance to both nations, ensuring stability in key areas of engagement is crucial, as it helps secure the fulfillment of our objectives.
Стабильность в некоторых отраслях взаимодействия.
Prime Minister Modi sets very challenging tasks for the country, and for himself in the first place, then for the administration, and eventually for the nation.
Take, for example, his famous pitch, Make in India. It has a practical dimension, including for our bilateral relations. When we meet, he always says, let's do this, let's do that, let's look at this area and that. I can list them all. Therefore, we have a lot of practical areas of cooperation.
But before Geeta takes on to the next question, one little small, very interesting question, because when you met Prime Minister Narendra Modi in SCO, and there was this picture and video of you and him going in a car, and we're showing it to our viewers right now, you were traveling in a car with him. Was it pre-planned, or how did it go about? How did it happen? And what did you discuss in the car?
We have just gone over the current topics. This wasn't prearranged. We simply stepped out and my car was waiting. I asked, would you like to come along? That's all there's to it. A gesture of human solidarity, camaraderie and friendship. No hidden scheme was involved. We climbed into the car like old friends and talked en route. We always have things to discuss. What's more, we continued our conversation and just remained in the car. Eventually, I suggested, let's go. They're already waiting for us. There's nothing special here. It simply indicates that we have matters to discuss, and those matters are very important to us.
Right. President Sir, the fact that you're going to go to India, you just said that both leaders are going to cement the guarantees that you give each other. What are the kind of announcements that we can expect? We've heard about technology transfer, we've heard about trade enhancement. What are the solid announcements during this visit? And I ask you this is because the world, and you know who I mean, would be watching.
The world would be watching our visit. There is no big deal here. India is an enormous country, home to 1.5 billion people, boasting a growing economy with a 7% annual growth rate, leading among major global powers. After all, Mr. Modi has made this possible. It's something both the Indian nation and Prime Minister Modi himself can rightfully claim as their achievement. Naturally, there will always be critics who think that improvements could have been more significant, but that's an achievement. We've laid out an ambitious plan for our collaboration in key domains. The most critical areas are indeed forward-looking. I'm referring specifically to high technology. Our partnership with India encompasses such fields as space exploration, energy, notably nuclear power, exemplified by the prominent Kudankulam nuclear power plant project, shipbuilding and aviation. There are many interesting areas for cooperation that are looking to the future. Take, for example, artificial intelligence. We'll likely discuss it further down the line. AI represents a crucial technology shaping the future, rapidly transforming the world, amplifying possibilities exponentially while simultaneously presenting certain challenges. There are the matters we will discuss, choosing the ones that are the most significant for us, as both Prime Minister Modi and I believe. That's what we will focus on and what we will work on.
Any specific agreements, sir?
Well, of course. However, perhaps we shouldn't reveal them just yet. We will do that during the visit, when we can unveil everything publicly. Then our colleagues will first share with us all the documents they have prepared, and it would require our final approval.
We'll now come to the energy sector, yeah.
Okay, just talking about sustainability and trade. There's immense pressure on India and on Russia. When it comes to oil, India has suffered in terms of the kind of pressure that we're seeing from West. How can both countries handle this Western pressure and sanctions?
The issue here is that the pressure you have referred to typically involves employing political instruments to influence normal competition. Our energy cooperation with India remains unaffected by current conditions, fleeting political swings, or indeed the tragic events in Ukraine. Regarding hydrocarbons, well before the Ukrainian situation, our business entities had already built a solid and efficient commercial relationship that is based on mutual trust. It's widely known that one of our leading companies acquired an oil refinery in India. This investment represented one of the largest foreign inflows into the Indian economy, totaling more than $20 billion. Our company has been continuously expanding operations of this refinery, working with its partners, and operating successfully year after year. As a result, India has become one of the major refined product suppliers to Europe, not just because it buys our oil with a discount. It took years to achieve and is in no way connected to the current economic environment. Certain actors clearly dislike India's growing role in international markets owing to its ties with Russia. Consequently, they're seeking means to constrain